Hello there, and welcome back to another episode of 365 Days Towards Racial Change. My name is Tomlins. Not back. Pleasure to be with you. Going through, taking care, wrapping up Harriet Stowe's phenomenal work. Chapter 45. We're just going to take our time through it. We got plenty of days left, obviously. It's day 290. And so we got 75 days of a lot of information to pound you with. What do I start with? I want you to understand, my burden, my motivation to do this work comes from Dr. Claude Anderson, which we'll talk about, Harriet's work, some other materials that we've uncovered and talked about through our time here. But mainly I think about the relationship between then and now, and how in a very systemic way, what I mean systemic by the patterns of slavery in America, they've not really gone anywhere. The schematic is still adhered to. It's just, it's underneath, it's buried. A good illustration would be like the New York waterway system. And you don't hear much about it now because they probably completed it. But initially, when they put the irrigation to supply fresh water to the city, it was modern for its time and worked well. But after time was aged, and in its aged state, they were worried about testing it because these locks or dams within these ducts are just ginormous, and they were afraid if they messed with the system that it would seize, and then you've got a huge problem. How do you keep fresh water to one of the largest cities on earth, right? It's the waterways, the schematic. Now, hence, in the meantime, they modernized some ducts and waterways kind of along with the route, with the old route, right? They didn't stop using the original irrigation for the city and stuff like that, but so they built a new one. But the point is, like, the original, what made bringing fresh water to the city a reality, those elements are still there, right? And I'm still sure in use today. Same idea with slavery in America and how America treats its disadvantage, how America does that now. Essentially is from the power group. Essentially the power group is white, right? And it's amazing, like, as this project wraps up in another 2 or so months, it's like, if I wouldn't, it doesn't make sense to discriminate against along lines of skin color. Of course, I'm with the disadvantaged group, so of course I believe that. There are plenty of white folks that are glad that they were born on that side of the fence and feel it's just, the will of God that they're there. St. Clair in Harriet Stowe's book is a good example of a white person. Oh, they're so burdened that they have so much responsibility in being in a place of power over black people. But that's just the way it goes. And so Harriet brings that out in the few characters in her book. On the flip side, are black people being educated, or is there any traction? I know for a fact I've been contacted here on YouTube, and I've had brief interactions with there's many other websites and channels about racism and oppression, disadvantage, marginalization. I'm sure they look at constitutional ideas behind this and all that, law. Dr. Anderson is here on YouTube, and other people. I've subscribed to channels, but I'm just not seeing a lot of traction in the real world. Now, part of it is I don't get out much anymore. I'm a little older now, so I don't run around. I don't run the streets. I think culture, society has fallen victim to the internet, right? We can sit here and be exactly who we want, have freedom of speech. It doesn't matter how big or small the audience is. My private email list, I think I can count on two hands the number of people that still accept my emails when I send them out, right? So, but, right, will we see a big awakening? Now, part of I'm kind of okay with that, oh no, maybe somebody will stumble onto this. I stumbled onto Dr. Anderson's work. Some of the books I'm going to reference 5-6 years after they were written, and hopefully maybe somebody will stumble onto this down the road, and where we could have that kind of movement in awareness and some volition, just the real grassroots, which is the way I prefer it. Anyway, but I envision a real unified black movement to gain traction and try to create some change for ourselves in some way, to some degree, in America, and broaden our horizons out in the world. The big solution is why I'm concerned with black education around these issues is, this kind of education has made some changes in me, and it's what's going to shore up and make our convictions more secure about what we're doing, and our motivations. Once we pause and dissect, slow down for a minute, whether it's here on a video, watching some other resources, understanding the reality, brutality that went on in America, how it went kind of underground and still is at the surface, supporting a lot of attitudes and conditions in America that are detrimental to black success in the land for black citizens. Along with that, I like to mention financial literacy. I was just musing today. Oh, Happy New Year. If you don't try to do the numbers on day 290, because it doesn't work out. I had to take a break for school. But Happy New Year 2020. Or get a hindsight 2020. Maybe this will be the year where our reflection has an impact on the present to make us better. But we want to. I want black people to succeed, to be competitive and effective in America. And for financial literacy, I was crunching my mind hard today. I've been way off track. I had a good thing going before I went on vacation. Life showed up a lot of things, so I've been off track, but I've got to get saving again and getting my budget again. You know, I really simplified my financial life when I got started adhering to a budget and started actually seeing daily what was happening with me financially. So I got to get that together. And what I'm encouraging you to do is to do that. Black people, not only are we're going out to plantations, you know, you know, a lot of the system of America is so much like 1840s, 1850s slavery. It really is. We were confined in a space. We work on the plantation. The master gives us enough to survive to come to the next day to work, or our dwelling places are less than the master's, but we are in proximity. All the elements. That's the way I see it. That's why I'm so adamant about this work. But anyway, get your financial literacy together. You don't want to be underneath, you know. You want to at least participate and be competitive as our white counterparts with mortgages, piece of land, moving towards ownership. If you are on public transportation maybe and you go, your plantation is a distance, so you get to ride through maybe some rural American areas, and you see off in the distance these houses and spaces and stuff. Well, you know, that's the kind of the American way, right? And it's my desire that all black folk see that, have that, make it real in their lives, not just pouring your money into paying rent. I hope we know your rent is paying their mortgage, so that they never have to worry. You're doing all the work for them. I don't like that. Get in a position where you had some ownership and competition. I'm inspired to do this work, like I mentioned, by a man named Dr. Claude Anderson. Read 3 of his works, and we just talked about him a day or 2 ago. But I always give him a shout out because his work, the videos I've watched on YouTube have just been, and have had an enormous impact. I think a lot of the changes in my life happened because of my awareness, his education, his way of pulling off this illusion that I lived under, that I was competing and had the same opportunities as white people in the land. You know, I knew there was maybe some issue there, but I had no idea the severity of the state I was in. But it's a continuing revelation and process. Read these books, and he's got plenty of material. Black Labor, White Wealth. I'm sorry, this is a Black History Reader. 101 questions you've never thought to ask. Black Labor, White Wealth. Search for Power and Economic Justice, and Dr. Anderson's National Plan to Empower Black America. Powernomics. You can find Dr. Anderson at powernomics.com. And here on YouTube, Easy Guy, Dr. Claude Anderson. Behind me, you see the hashtag #US2 symbol. Find black women having their groups and support there. Check out Black Enough, BLAGGENUF. Kind of a Black Facebook experience. If you've got a business mind, tell Dr. Boyce Watkins hello for me at the Black Business School. And there's it's the internet, and you can find your flavor anywhere. If you can't stumble on to what you are after, what you're about, do what I did. Start your own. A lot of these free sites and stuff. I think they're just collecting information, but what the heck, the information goes out. And Uncle Tom's Cabin, we're wrapping up. We're in the last chapter, just meandering on through like it's a very quiet spring day. We've done some exploring in the woods, and now we're just listening to the insects, and there's fragrant wild flowers, gentle breeze. It's not too hot, and we're just walking down the lane as we leave this space of Uncle Tom's Cabin that we've been at for a little while here. Day 290 here, chapter 45. It's going to be in many parts because I don't want to have Harriet's thoughts, some factual information, things like that. So we're in no hurry to leave Uncle Tom's Cabin. Want to really get, there's a coffee commercial. We don't hear it anymore, but good to the last drop, right? We want to squeeze all the use and energy and value of that. I still got a flip phone, all right? And the people, this smartphone world, they send me stuff and my phone scrambles it. I ain't changing phones. The phone works. So no, you don't. You're not. I'm going to get that the phone is going to fall apart in my hands one day. That's what I'll just get a new phone. And maybe another flip phone. I don't know. That's what we're doing with Uncle Tom's Cabin. We learned Harriet was prompted by Josiah Henson, and very heard his story and things. He fled to Canada. She somehow got a hold. He published his story. I guess it was popular for slaves. We got Josiah Henson, Frederick Douglass, other slaves coming out, sharing their stories about issues as a slave. And those stories embraced. Harriet took the story and ran with it, much like I took Dr. Anderson's words and work, and I ran with it, right? So as we get into chapter 45, the story is over. Fiction is over. Chapter 45, concluding remarks. Harriet's she's gonna talk about herself. She's gonna talk about the source of some of these fictional characters and things that we read about. Let me read this from the second paragraph in Uncle Tom's Cabin. The separate incidents that compose the narratives are, to a very great extent, authentic, occurring, many of them, either under her own observation, that is Harriet Beecher Stowe's, or that of her personal friends, and we're going to hear from her brother in a moment. Right, so, some of these stories, she's read Josiah Henson's memoirs, and you hear these stories, or you see this. You go to the South. Lately I've been having this strange reaction to these commercials that look for donations for hungry children, abused animals, sick children, and I tend to turn those commercials, not because I don't care or that I can't help. I wish I had the resources to wave a wand and cure it all, but that seeing that dysfunction and illness in the world doesn't sit right with me. So I often turn those commercials, and I can imagine some Northerners in their civility and whatnot, not readily traveling in the South and having issues about hearing stories and maybe even watering down or downplaying some of these reports they hear from the South, right? I used to drive for one of these rideshare companies, and I did what most people do. They sit in their car. Sometimes they temporarily park in the fire lane to wait for the fare to come out. So I was doing that, and this white cop is like giving me a hard time and stuff like that. And the woman finally came out, and so we're going on, and I was like just irritated, and she's downplaying the the incident, right? See, in America, there's an issue with white cops and black men, and so this white woman, she doesn't want to be kind of, she doesn't want her atmosphere cluttered with that kind of tension. So she waters it down, making me even more angry and whatnot. But I'm guessing that Northerners, in another day or two, we're going to look at the church as well up north at this time. But the Northerners might not want to travel or see some of the gross behavior, some of the punishments meted out on slaves, or uh, all kinds of chaos and foolishness, right? So Harriet is like, I've seen some of this, and I'm an abolitionist, and she did the fictional part, but I'm sure maybe she tried to be as fair as possible, not embellish some of the stories too much. We found out that the story of a slave woman crossing the icy Ohio River, maybe with her child, but jumping from ice to ice, is a true story. Right? That there's eyewitnesses, not just Harriet, that this happened. So this is a Southern story. I'm sure it grew in the myth, and it's not impossible. But yeah, like, and I think I wrote it in the description. You can click on the description; it should expand. Where I say, what kind of terror is this person running from? That they're going to risk slippery, wet ice, because you go down in that, it's impossible, like impossible to get back up out of that. But yeah, so that story has truth to it. That someone, a female slave, did do that. The narrative of Prue comes from Harriet Beecher Stowe's brother. She tells us the story of Old Prue in the second volume was an incident that fell under the personal observation of a brother of the writer. So her brother was passing through someday and sees these abuses. Here's the story of a slave that's been beaten, thrown into the cellar, and is rotting. The flies are at her, right? So he hears more of the story that this woman had to listen to one of her children starve to death while her white female slave owner demanded that Prue stay close to minister to her needs whenever, like that. There are human beings that demonic that they tell a mother to leave that baby is getting in the way of your ministry to me, of your service to me. So leave that baby alone, right? It drove Prue into alcoholism, and so she was stealing from the till. The black community around her was not supportive. Had no mercy or compassion for her drinking. Didn't care the reason for her drinking and all that. I just, very judgmental towards her, and that she was not being like a Christian, God, like how do you figure religion into that space where you've got this God that raised up these white people who tell me to leave my baby to starve to death. Interesting, how you want to digest and process all of that. Simon Legree, that's another one of her brother's testimonies. So she's got a couple. She wove in some of the stories from her brother when her brother was actually got this story from Louisiana. And let me read some of this here. For Legree, of him, her brother, that's Harriet Stowe, thus wrote, speaking of visiting his plantation, this real Legree character plantation, on a collecting tour. Her brother had to do something with finance. Here's what her brother said. He actually made me feel his fist, which was like a blacksmith's hammer or a nodule of iron, telling me that it was calloused with knocking down niggers. When I left the plantation, I drew a long breath and felt as if I had escaped from an ogre's den. And remember we talked a little bit about these incidents, these manifestations in the South are not isolated incidents that you maybe hear about once in a while that are uncommon in the land, but brutality, manipulation, coercion, the sexuality we're going to talk about, I think, tomorrow or the next day. But these are happenstance. These are run-of-the-mill happenings in the slave experience, right? These are not wild stories and rantings, right? White people are witnessing this or discussing this. Harriet's writing a book, and there's deliberations going on. If you go to Philadelphia sometime and hang down, I think it's Rittenhouse Square, where you see the Liberty Bell and where the first where the capital of the United States used to be in Philadelphia. And you go there and you see these method actors. They're walking around and they're acting out conversations about abolition and Civil War and stuff like that. So, and they're just walking around having these conversations. But go to Philadelphia sometime, you'll see what I'm talking about, right? So these are very real happenings, and there was some integrity around it, right? Technology has dismissed the need, in a sense, for integrity, because now we can videotape you secretly. I can have a little eyepiece woven into my shirt practically nowadays and get it all on camera. But back then, you could count on at least some degree of integrity in testimonies you hear about these injustices going on in the land. I'm a little bit out of time. Thanks for tuning in. Again, we're going to keep just walking through chapter 45. I want to give a shout out. I noticed my ticker going up on, I guess, comments and views. Thank you for keeping up. I have a fan that I have lunch with every once in a while. If you've made it this far, we'll have lunch soon again, I'm sure. And you can tell me that you've watched 290, and that's 145 minutes, I guess. No, it's hours. Anyway, that's a lot of viewing. But thank you, everyone who's keeping up. I promise I'm going to get to these. I'm catching up from school. I'm going to go back to school. So don't be discouraged and be like, oh, he just never gets. I do. I will. I promise. Just got to get it in there. Life. It's life. I'm Tomlin's Nyback. Thanks. Day 290 out of the way. Great to see you again. Come back next time and we'll talk a little bit about murder, sex, and stuff. Hey, that should hook you to come back. Take it easy.